SABC in Johannesburg. Happy Mother's Day to all of the women of our country and the world. Women indeed have a raw deal. Issues of women abuse have dominated the headlines, of course, last week with the appropriate and firm sentence of 32 years to the coward and cold-blooded killer of Karabo Mokoena. The judiciary is sending a firm message to all who believe in abusing women. The executive and the legislature are dragging their feet, on the other hand, not sending a same message. Once again, it seems the judiciary to the rescue. That's why a convicted women basher like Mduduzi Manana was at it again last week, beating up a domestic worker this time, then proceeding to bribe her with 100,000 rands under a tree outside a police station. Can you believe the temerity of it all? Well, let's have a look at how the matter arose in Parliament this past week.
Do you believe that the Honourable Mduduzi Manana, who's already been found guilty of abusing one woman and is now alleged to have abused his domestic worker and then bribed her to drop the case, is still suitable to be an MP for the ruling party? If so, why?
The issues of Member of Parliament Mduduzi Manana have not been made known to me in the exact detail that you are describing, and clearly even he, Mduduzi Manana, has to go through his own party's systems of accountability, and we need to allow that to happen.
Well, are they serious about these issues? You be the judge. But today we're talking business. Is the relationship between government and business on the mend after the horrific 10 years of a Jacob Zuma presidency where it reached rock bottom? You would remember the famous accusation by the Minister of Small Business alleging that business is conspiring with the markets to oust President Zuma. Early this year, we saw business confidence going on the rise following the Nazareth conference of the ANC. But last week, it took a dip. It regressed a bit. And what may possibly this mean? Is business and government speaking the same language about the future of our economy? Let's take a look.
We believe in South Africa's future. We share the values set out in its constitution. And we say humbly, we want to play our part in ensuring the transformation so many in South Africa need so desperately. We are patriots who see our role as creating jobs, growing the economy, investing in communities.
As a starter, we are going to be embarking, as we go for this ambitious goal, we're going to be embarking on a number of initiatives. One of those initiatives is the trip that I'm undertaking now to London. We're going to be having a road show with a number of investors and showcasing our country to them. And this is the kickstart of this process of getting would-be investors interested in us.
Well, we hope that means a new dawn for business as well as economic development in our country. My guest tonight to help me understand this role of business in rebuilding the economy, amongst other issues, is a fiery CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Mr. Bonang Mohale. Let's go talk frankly to him. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for making the time, and this has been a long time coming, and really appreciate your time. The last 10 years, absolute disaster when it comes to the relationship between government and business. What characterized that decline? What would you say if you had to give me 2 or 3 things that said this is what really caused this thing to be so terrible? And you have said to me on many occasions the relationship had broken down, and one hopefully, of course, believes that it has changed. But let's start there in terms of analyzing what went wrong.
So firstly, context is everything. When you have ethical leadership, you have good policies that then give us both business and consumer confidence. These then make it easy to attract foreign direct investment. With FDI, we have economic growth. Jobs are just a logical outcome. Therefore, when we talk about redistribution of wealth, we don't mean redistribution of poverty. Therefore, ethical leadership is absolutely key. What led to the breakdown between business and the old government, we must say, it's one, the project that was unfolding for more than 10 years called state capture, that was stealing 100 billion South African rands a year, every year. In 10 years, it's R1 trillion. That's almost as much as we collect from revenues. The second, it's a sitting president who does not act in the interest of South Africa Inc., but acts in his own personal and the Gupta's interest by recalling a sitting finance minister, his deputy, and the entire National Treasury to come back so that he fires them to do what? To enable the project of state capture. Those were the two things that made us as business to lose confidence in the path, the trajectory that we are following for the last 10 years. But thank God that it has changed.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about how that has changed and what, in your view, are the specific changes that you can point to me since December. But would you say that business itself had a role in the breaking down of that relationship? And I'll give you an indication here. In terms of what government would be passionate about, would be economic empowerment, transformation, black economic empowerment, things of that nature, right? There was a feeling that business itself was not too committed to those values. And so government can also point the finger and say, part of why this has collapsed is that business itself didn't take those imperatives of change seriously.
I think it will be absolutely correct. 24 years into democracy, it is still worrisome that most black people and women are spectators of their own lived experience. It is still unacceptable that we have to be told by our young people with hashtag everything must fall that nothing about us, even if it is for us, without us. The arrogance of CEOs coming up with solutions without adequately consulting the communities that are affected and indeed implicated is unacceptable. And then lastly, in business, talking about gender equality, and yet today, 24 years into democracy in South Africa, in this country, where so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail, women are still paid 73% of what we pay men. So 24 years later, we've been paying lip service, and we have not done enough to transform. Transformation in simple English means fundamentally breaking with the past so that it bears no resemblance to this that
what
it is
the bottleneck,
changing.
though? What is the bottleneck? I mean, you've just mentioned one horrific statistic. Excuse me. But there's another statistic that 60% of all new appointments, all new promotions, at least until about a year ago, so 23 years of democracy, are still to white people. Right? Your members, who are some of these blue chip companies, big business and so on, are at the center of that. The JSE is poorly owned by blacks. I mean, 3%, or when they cook the figures, they could even say 20%. Still very pathetic after 24 years. How do you explain that in Asia?
In fact, that is why we are at Business Leadership South Africa, this organization that was founded in 1960, before even I was born, to help our CEOs not to be tone deaf, to sensitize them to what the country is saying, so that they can genuinely listen, to really hear, not to listen to defend, to understand this notion of patriarchy, but of white privilege, to understand that if the two proposed amendments just to two laws are not speaking to us loudly and clearly, then we are missing the point. The amendments on the Competitions Commission focusing on economic concentration is really quite instructive.
Are they listening? Are they listening in your view? Because it doesn't look like those statistics are changing. It doesn't look like there is a rapid change in how the complexion of corporate South Africa is looking like in the workforce, right? Forget about the ownership and the BEE things that seems to have come to a standstill. Are they listening?
I think they can do much more. What we see with the 81 CEOs that we represent is that more and more of them are becoming blacker and more African. Of the 13 CEOs who are part of my board, more than half of them are now black. We talk about Mtandazo, Peter Moyo of Old Mutual Emerging Markets, Simpiwe Chabalala, who runs Standard Bank, of Ubaba, who's running now Anglo American South Africa, Andile Sangu. And we're talking about the people that are really doing their best to run financial services in Sex in Tombel. Just 2 years ago, these people were not there. It's little, and that's why we are talking to our people, indeed, our CEOs, to do much, much more. That's why we were very explicit that you cannot replace 2 white men in 2013 and say everything is okay when 51%
so you're saying you
of
are
the
getting
population
there, but
is
you're
female.
not where you want to be.
Too slowly, absolutely.
It's too slowly. Lots of maneuvers about so-called joint CEOs. You wake up one day, a black CEO replaced by a white, going backwards. You wake up and then business, demonstrates a reluctance to change through things like the deadlock on the mining industry. I want to talk a little bit about that after the break, about economic policy and economic landscape and how these questions of change that are happening slowly are affecting some of those. We're talking to Bonang Mohale tonight, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. You can follow our show on hashtag Frankly Speaking. Let's take a break.
Hello, I'm Simpiwe Ngongane, and as usual, I'm in the company of the pearl of the show.
And yes, I'm Pearl Shongwe, and this is the weekend edition of Morning Live,
where we bring you news stories, making headlines, weather updates, and the latest in the world of sports.
Every weekend on Saturday and Sunday mornings, we bring you, our viewer, vibrant, exciting, informative current stories here on the SABC News Channel 404.
And we also put a spotlight on creative art stories, book reviews, poetry, and various topical stories. We also bring you live outside broadcast as well as live music performances. All of this every weekend between 6 and 9 here on the SABC News Channel 404.
So TB continues to be the top infectious killer worldwide, claiming 4,500 lives a day. It is estimated that approximately 1% of the global population is autistic. So if you're on a medical aid, how well do you understand the benefit structure and how your medical aid generally works? And if you're not on a medical aid, have you considered belonging to one? So how much and what should you know about this condition? Is it curable? Can people living with epilepsy, for instance, play sport, drive cars, get employed? 7 million people around the world die annually as a result of tobacco use.
For Health Tip, catch Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking with me on Khopotse JJ Tawani. Tonight we're talking business, the relationship between business and government, what business is doing to take us forward. The new dawn, right? What specifically can you tell me? I mean, it's been now almost 5 months, right, of these new developments and some new noises happening, investment. We saw the president there earlier on in that clip going, sending emissaries around the world. What has changed in 2 or 3 terms?
So first, what has changed, linking up with your previous question, is BLSA coming out clearly and saying we are worried about this trend of joint CEOs, starting with Ballowworld, Standard Bank, Sasol, and now Investec.
At least Standard Bank has abandoned that. I mean, SIM is now seemingly in charge
But
now.
also these things happen through lots of lobbying in the background to say, why is it then when it is black people's turn that all of a sudden...
I mean, how can you make Sim Chabalala a joint CEO with anybody?
You know, And some of them have been
experience.
CEOs for such a long time.
You know?
What has really changed is the last quarter of 2017, after the 20th of December,
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa now being the new president of the African National Congress.
Yeah.
The real tragedy is that we don't know how worse it could have been if we did not halt the precipice.
Yeah, no, God forbid,
Yeah,
honestly.
absolutely.
Yes.
So we saw a positive GDP growth of 3.1%,
Okay.
which then gave us the full year of 1.3%.
Yeah.
Both of these figures much higher than World Bank estimates. We saw action. For 6 years as business, we have been saying there must be an independent judicial commission of inquiry. The new president meets the sitting president who's in charge of the intelligence and the army and the police, and on Monday, the same president announces an independent judicial commission of inquiry. The Hawks spring into action. They raid the offices of the Premier of the Free State, and they do that with the MEC. And all of a sudden, even Sean the Sheep springs into action, and the asset forfeiture unit does its job. Too little, too late, but better late than never.
Yeah.
And since then, this president has made 23 changes in his first cabinet reshuffle. Got rid of 10 ministers. We understand that it's walking the tightrope.
Yeah,
it is walking
absolutely.
on eggs. He's already said that it is about unity, it's about renewal, it's also about growth.
One of the complaints of business ahead of Nasrec and before has been the issue of policy uncertainty. Let's take one or two policies that came out of Nasrec. I mean, the issue of land expropriation without compensation. How can that be in the category of bring stability, in your view? Is BLSA in support of that policy? It's a very clear policy. It says land of some of your members who own vast tracts of land and property may be taken without them getting a cent for it.
In fact, the best way to look at this is to accept that in our constitution, there's already more than enough provision for land expropriation without compensation. Because Section 25 talks about restitution, redistribution, and it also talks about this notion of the property rights. And it says when conditions of fair and equitable have been fulfilled, compensation can be down to zero. So here we're seeing a failure of policy implementation rather than now having to go and amend the constitution. Everything we need.
Are you saying you are not going? Your view is that the constitution is not to be amended. It's not necessary. There's a process now in Parliament. Are you going to be putting your view forward that don't amend the constitution, implement what we've got?
It's more than enough, absolutely. In fact, we have had workshops with our members, the CEOs, who have already made a written submission, and we are saying, first of all, we appreciate a number of things. That the president raised it sensitively and appropriately at the State of the Nation address. And he put conditions that it has to be with economic growth, increasing agricultural output, and giving us food security.
But the current resolution is very clear. It says
very clear.
All of the land must reside with the state, and the state will then lease it to whoever is putting it to good use. It's different from saying implement what's in the constitution. Are you saying that as business you are opposed to this resolution that's on the table by the EFF, supported by almost everyone in Parliament?
In fact, we are saying as business, if we're to oppose it, we'll be disingenuous and irresponsible. Because if we do not address the issue of land, this country will be worse than Venezuela and Zimbabwe. And what has been proposed in the constitutional amendments, if any, is to assure that this is done orderly and in a constitutionally sound manner. And that's what we appreciate.
Okay.
Therefore, you're pulling the rug under the populist, and you're saying we are going to locate it in the ad hoc committee that reviews the constitution so that all the contentious issues are indeed
the hope is that
ventilated.
the final outcome won't look like the current resolution, which just blanketly says we expropriate everything and then everybody must stand aside.
Absolutely.
That's our hope for what will happen out of the constitutional process.
But also remember that the holder of large tracts of land is not the private sector. It's actually government. And there we exclude the South African National Defence Force. That sits on absolute prime property. Thirdly, we forget...
But your members haven't been too vocal about supporting this resolution.
No, in fact, we do support.
Hiding in the shadows.
But also what we forget is that in Soweto alone, 2010 statistics, there's more than 3.5 million people. This is more than the population of Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Namibia. And yet, we have not given these people title deeds so that they can leverage this and use it as collateral to start their own businesses. And yet we talk about small and medium enterprises creating jobs in large quantities. And then lastly, we say, if the government does this cleverly and responsibly, in fact, they can go to Stellenbosch, where the last dying hours of the democracy, we know that there are some white farmers who were given huge tracts of land irresponsibly just to block the ascendancy of black people. And redress, so there's not one business person who's not going to support the fact that this land was obtained illicitly, illegally, and we need to start with those tracts of land. It's interesting.
I must say, I've not heard that voice loudly enough. Let's turn to business again now. A lot of speculation and conjecture about about what is called investor boycott, investment boycott, that you guys, your members, who you so articulately speak for, are sitting on almost a $1 trillion rand, not investing it and whatnot. After the break, I want you to address me on that. And then let's turn also to some of the private sector corruption that's been boiling under over the last couple of months. You're on Frankly Speaking. We're talking to Bonang Mohale, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. You can follow us on hashtag Frankly Speaking. You can tweet us at JJ Tabane. You can also tweet us at SABC News Online. Let's take a break.
We give you a front row seat to all the local and international entertainment news on Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Well, on Frankly Speaking, we're talking to Bonang Mohale, the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. Just on Twitter, Malosekana is asking, what is BLSA position on the creation of a state-owned bank? I hope we can also be able to tackle that in this segment as we round off the conversation. Victor Khomeswana asking, is BLSA acting even-handedly against corruption in the private sector as it does in the public sector? Let's start with this issue of investment and we'll end with the corruption question.
So let me
investment boycott, myth or truth?
So let me close first with the land question by saying land is not only central to the struggle of African people, but it is as important as the concentration camps was to the Afrikaners and Auschwitz was to the Jewish people. So if it's not addressed, we'll be even in bigger trouble in future, like Zimbabwe did 20 years after democracy. On investment strategy, we released 2 reports. One is called Intellidex report. The other one was Quantac report. Intellidex punctured the inflated fallacy that business is on an investment boycott.
So there's no
but
such?
It said, of course, it doesn't exist. But it said there is cash hoarding. Cash hoarding happens when you plan to go and buy another company. In another 3 months, you keep the cash. It happens when there is regulatory uncertainty and policy instability. You can't say there is an investment boycott when the skyline of Sentin is changing. Have you seen the big, huge gorilla that is called the Discovery Building and the Sasol Building next door, the Weber Wenzel and the Werkmans?
It's like a spaceship.
Who's putting that money if not the private sector?
Spaceship. Are you saying to me it's not linked? Because in another way you are actually saying that it's linked to policy instability. So it means that if there was no policy instability, there would be more investment.
Oh, much, much more.
Are we at the point where business is now sort of relaxing a little bit and beginning to release this cash that is hoarding to make sure that we can generate jobs?
Absolutely. In fact, we have heeded the call by the president to raise $100 billion US in foreign direct investment. But what people forget is that he's giving us a target for $100 billion US that is domestic. That must be led and fronted by local business. It must be led by the 81 CEOs.
Corruption. Victor is asking there, are
So
you as
corruption-
tough on your private sector friends and
We have
and
said
members?
we stand against state capture and corruption wherever it happens. There are bad people in government and in private sector. In fact, it is instructive that the first company we suspended their membership was KPMG, which is the private sector, not Eskom and Transnet. We did that later. So we will continue to be embarrassed by businesses that act outside of the realms of the law and will continue to act hard because it steals from the poor, it affects them disproportionately, and it cannot be called good business.
On transformation, how can we assess your success as BLSA when I talk to you next? Briefly.
When you see the 81 CEOs who are members of my council being majority black and broadly reflective of the demographics, not what we have, white males being responsible for 74% of positions of leadership.
Bonang Mohale, thank you so much for talking to us tonight.
Thank
you. That was Frankly Speaking, coming to you live from Auckland Park here in Johannesburg. And continue to follow conversations on social media at hashtag Frankly Speaking. And until we talk frankly again, may God bless you.